Gavin, we've got some update from Gavin, but he needs to get going for a train, so we're going to get going quite quick. We are streaming tonight. Is this on now? Oh, brilliant. So the whole point in these events and why they were formed was really just to try and get grassroots industry people in a room chatting about what we can do with open banking. Over my lifetime, I've seen you can get people in a room and chat. They make things happen. Obviously, the other part of it is to try and get people communicating, sharing ideas. And these events are run pretty informally. We'll be done with presentations and things within about 25-30 minutes, and then we'll get on to actually chatting, shopping, getting some other ideas together, and working on what we're going to do for the next events and things as well. We've also got, we're nearly up to 400 members now, which is pretty enormous. We launch in London on Wednesday.
On Wednesday, yeah.
Payments focused again, as we are tonight.
So if you have contacts and networks in London, please feel free to share. It should be a good event. It's at Scotland House on Wednesday, I think about 6 o'clock, 6:30.
Yeah. And then is there anything else I've missed off our epistemology of open banking excellence?
No, I mean it's about right. A lot of people that have been here before understand the format. We try and keep it, as you said, pretty simple. Yeah. But it's about a community, so share, get involved. Last time we talked about setting up a little working group around customer engagement and will customers use open banking and how will they use it? So if anyone wants to be involved in maybe a little side chat, get a little round table together on that in the next couple of weeks, let us know. And we'll definitely pull that together shortly.
Yeah, I mean, going forward, anyone got any comments, input, anything at all, just let us know, because it's, like I said in an email recently, it's, James and I are setting it up, but it's all of our events and it won't work unless we get people coming forward with ideas and things.
Cool.
So without further ado.
So tonight we've got, we'll get Gavin doing a little update. Stephen from finTech Scotland is also going to do a few minutes on some of the things that are happening in the world of open banking. I think it's fair to say open banking is now a trend. Is that acceptable? Is it now a thing?
It's trending.
It's trending. Hashtag open banking, right? It's definitely trending. I'm seeing it from our own point of view across the world. I was in New York last week. Boston's FinTech Week there was a huge number of conversations, I understand, around open banking. Even in New York, talking to people like EY and IBM and MasterCard, people know what open banking is. So it's really exciting. It's a huge shift from 5-10 years ago when I got involved 10 years ago. Gavin, I think it's 12, 13, 15 months ago, from 5 months ago. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We've also got Mike from PCL who's going to do a few minutes on what they're doing or thinking about in payments in this space. I think payments is going to start to come to the table a lot more around the open banking space over the few months. So that's exciting to see. And then from our own side, Andrew, wherever he is going to do a quick intro on a little project we've been working on the side. So for those that don't know, we're a business that builds products based on bank data. It's what we've been living and breathing for a long time. And we've had a sort of theory about PFM that we've developed alongside of other things. So we'd love to get your feedback on that. Andrew will talk a little bit more. And then it's all around networking and connecting. So, if someone's got something they want to share with us, a couple minutes on what you're doing in open banking or the projects you're working on, when we do the end of the talks, just grab a couple minutes, lets everybody else know what you're doing, and then kicks the conversation off. So we can go grab another drink and do the all-important networking bit. So, I don't know, Gavin?
Yeah, I'll come up and just give a quick update on. So, since the last month in open banking, a lot has changed, and the speed which we're now changing is accelerating. Probably the biggest and most important event on a global basis is my colleague tomorrow is testifying in the Senate to the senators on what's going on in the world of open banking. Locally, though, within the UK, the open banking implementation entity reached a number of very material decisions over the course of I guess, right through August and into September. The third version of the API has now been published, which takes us right the way through to March. For anybody that's following the trail here, March is a very important date because all of the banks that want to qualify from an exemption to also having to support screen scraping with identity have to get something in place to show to the market by then. So this latest version of standards will enable more of the functionality that builds us towards payments to be delivered and a number of the other artifacts that the market needed. I'd say at the moment the API quality between the 9 banks that are supposed to have delivered is mixed. Some of the banks are really getting there and have been consistent and stable and have reasonable customer journeys. Some of the banks have had weak customer journeys and have had APIs that haven't quite been stable enough, if that makes sense. But I do think they're going to get there. A number of things that have been a particular encouragement. The market has now adopted what they call the FAPI security profile. So the security profile is the bit through which the bank and the bankroll and the fintech roll plug in together. And it's easiest to think of it very similar to a plug in a socket. So if the bank's building a universal socket, you want to be able to come along and connect. And it's really important to the market that that's done in a consistent way. Otherwise, it'd be like buying an electrical device and having to wire every socket yourself to make it work. So having that consistency and that global standard of what they call the financial API has been a massive breakthrough. In addition to that, open banking in the UK has introduced some standard implementation requirements. These are things which all parties, both the bank and the bankroll and the fintech roll, are able to know when they've done the thing right. It's like a proper, thorough checklist of all the things they must have to be in the market. That's being backed up with an increasingly broad and competent suite of conformance testing tools. So rather than relying, as was envisaged in the Payment Services Directive, on things being widely adopted, which is not really fair in the banks, or being widely available, which doesn't talk to their quality, we're now able to bypass those two principles and just say, does it work, and actually use automated test suites against it, which is a massive breakthrough. All in all, I would say if you were to judge the UK's delivery of open banking, it's coming along well, and that all of the policies that we need to actually deliver it properly, I'd say are now more or less there. There's still a few things relating to the delivery that need to be tightened up, and just a consistency of that, which we'd like to see. One of the things we'll use to drive that consistency is we're starting to build a toolkit of management information or key performance indicators where we start to surface up to the public the quality of the delivery. At the moment it's all just a bit hidden. So I think in the next few weeks we should start to see some of the market metrics come forward. In the regulatory sphere, the European Banking Authority is yet to publish their prognosis on the exemption, but helpfully that's where the banks don't have to also support screen scraping. Helpfully, the Financial Conduct Authority today published their guidance on that, and that's also going to try to help illuminate what the regulated fintechs can do. There's various bits of confusion around what they're entitled to do with their regulated status vis-a-vis offering their services to other fintechs to piggyback on their permission. So I've not yet read that document, but I spoke to the FCA this afternoon, and I'm hoping when we do get through it that process leads us to a good output. The consultation on that is to be finished and input by the 12th of October. So we've got a few weeks now just to turn that around and make sure that the regulators hear back what the market's needing to take it forward. I think that the European Banking Authority and the FCA will be heavily aligned, so I suggest, without knowing the truth, that there's probably going to be quite a lot of similarity in how the FCA has interpreted its approach, taken from the research that the EBA did at a Europe-wide level. Other than that, the one thing which I can sort of seed out without being able to give the full facts at the moment because I don't know them, the scope of open banking has a number of conversations going on to move it beyond just payments and into loans, investments, mortgages and pensions. There's a pensions task force which is looking at the transparency in that market about how people's pensions get surfaced. So from a UK perspective, I'd imagine that once we get through Brexit, whatever that means, we'll get on to actually delivering the wider lens of open banking with all these other artefacts in it, which will be tremendously exciting for the market. And with that, I'm going to make a dash for the train station. Thank you.
So you can't ask him any questions, but he's on email.
If you want me to take a couple of questions, I can come to it.
Is there any burning questions for Gavin? He is on email. But
So you mentioned the screenscraping quite a few times, during Clydesdale Bank, and as a fallback mechanism, and it's kind of been your opinion before now that that wasn't maybe acceptable, and the screenscraping plus would be. And it sounds from what you said that there's almost a different view in that, but maybe hasn't filtered down to the industry that as a fallback mechanism, screenscraping will be acceptable.
So the crux of it is that nobody in the industry was ever bothered about the screen scraping bit of what's known as screen scraping. The bit that was of concern was the credential sharing that led to the screen scraping. It says in the level 1 text of PSD2 that the TPP, the fintech and the fintech world will be able to rely on using those credentials to link to the bank or the credit card. In the UK, we obviously selected as our primary route the redirection model, where the fintech's linked across, and hopefully most people understand how that works. That's the guidelines I was referring to. No, the situation is that the fallback position is the credential sharing through to screen scraping. So you share the credentials, you scrape the data, but you have to identify to the institution that you're connecting to that it's not the human that they think it is that's connecting, but actually a regulated actor. And from September the 13th, 2019, I understand unless they create further wiggle room due to the timetable, and I think that's very possible, that the thing may, that if you're a fintech, you'll have to identify yourself if you're using that method of access. Some banks may say we're not supporting that level of access because look, we've got an exemption certificate from our regulator, but the clarity of how that plays out is the big issue at the moment.
And hopefully that FCA consultation.
Yes, we'll take us some way towards that. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Stephen, what do you got for us this month?
So I think I must say actually, Gavin, he's so modest actually, because he's only really skimmed the surface of some of the stuff. And I know that because I've been living with Gavin this last 6 weeks or so. He's been living with us really up in Roxford Street in the university. And actually there's far more going on. So I guess my role with FinTech Scotland alongside Gavin, as long as carrying the bags, is actually what we're trying to do is put some sort of foundations of how do we make this part of the world, this part of Scotland, this part of Edinburgh really sort of the centre of excellence of all things open banking and then open finance. And that's something we've been working on, Gavin and I, with our colleagues at the university. And that stems really from engagement at a political level. So we've had sessions with John Glenn, who's the Secretary of State for the Treasury, who visited a few weeks back, alongside the two key ministers, really, from a Scottish Government point of view, Kate Forbes and Ivan McKee, as well as Derek Mackay, in terms of their engagement. Because whilst the politicians are not there to drive open banking, they're key in terms of getting that mobilisation about what we could potentially create here in terms of foundations. Alongside that, I won't go into the names yet, but we've been engaging with those big institutions who are key in terms of open banking, in terms of data coming in and resources to create some of the foundations that are quite sort of key, and those are emerging. Alongside engaging with future investors who would actually provide the capital to provide really the fuel to help innovations. And in fact, James and Laurel joined me on one of those when we had some visits through the university from sovereign fund investors from the Middle East and Far East. So all that is kind of all about, these are small stepping stones about building some of the foundations that we need, really to encourage here to be a centre for excellence around open banking and open finance, to encourage greater innovation and participation by the bigger enterprises. That takes time, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but we are making progress, and we're hoping really that when we get to when the big global open banking summit sort of takes place, which is organised by Gavin's organisation FData, some of you remembers, takes place in December 6th and 7th in McEwan's Hall up at the university, we'll be able to unfold and start to share some of those foundations. So that's what we're working towards. There's not any sort of big announcement at the moment, but that's sort of an example of how we bring alive open banking as an environment for innovation for both innovators and big enterprises, but also with a focus on creating what we refer to as an economic observatory, creating a focus around the social policy around open banking, and also the ethics and standards that are required as well in adopting an open banking sort of standard. So all those elements are part of the mix. On that latter piece, a key part of our engagement for both Gareth and myself has actually been with the regulator, the FCA, who are hugely supportive around this, and there's an indication of that. What they've agreed upon, what they've put forward, which we've agreed really from the 1st of October, is one of their senior regulators is actually joining FinTech Scotland full-time for 12 months on secondment. Really to focus working with me and Gavin on the open banking sort of developments, alongside some of the other FinTech developments as well. That provides us with someone really on a day-to-day basis to be working with us in some of those developments. I think that's a terrific sort of endorsement around the community here in Scotland, the strategic opportunity and the opportunity to have the regulator involved at the outset. And Nicola Anderson will join on the 1st of October working with myself, and the future meeting, Nicola will be along here with us as well. So that's an indication that some of the FCA very much sort of seeing this opportunity of being involved in the innovation and the commitment about what we're trying to build. So they're just the stepping stones. We're starting to piece some of that together. I think over the coming months, really, I think Gary and I will be able to share a bit more of some of the examples, hopefully, that we'd like to sort of bring alive. The last piece I'd like to mention, because it's in line with the theme around payments, FinTech's fortnight kicked off Thursday. It was due to kick off today, and we just had a terrific event on the international sort of side here, hosted by James with some international contributions, but actually started on Thursday and started in Fife, as many as you know, because that's where FinTech started, as Bill reminds me often, 40 odd years ago, Bill, in Dalgety Bay. That's where FinTech really started globally anywhere. And the FinTech community in Fife, based around payments, have got together over recent months and created what they refer to as a FinTech Skills Consortium to develop an academy with some actual specific development around skills development focused on payments. And that's what they announced, the community announced with them last Thursday up in Fife. And I think that's a terrific example about the community coming together with the council, with the college, coming together in terms of something that's actually affordable and accessible for people to move into the world of FinTech in a specific area where there are skills, but those skills need to be sort of built upon going forward in terms of the numbers of people. And it's a real sort of testament actually to the Fife community. You've got Renovite Technologies who have recently moved part of their operation from California-based business to Fife and started up there. So there's an example, and I think maybe at some stage the community can think about a future skills academy in other areas, not necessarily Fife, could be here in Edinburgh or somewhere else, Melrose, around other aspects of open banking that maybe would like to come back and consider. But it's a great shining example about what the Fife community have done around skills focused on payments.
Cool. And a good lead into PCL, doing a little 5-minute chat. Thanks, Stephen. Does anyone have any questions for Stephen? Quickly. Or any questions?
Get on the bar.
I know also the CMA, I was talking to the CMA, who have an increasing presence in Edinburgh, keen to start coming along a little bit more and get involved. Obviously, the heart of open banking as the force to make it happen. So it'd be great to get that engagement from them as well. But Mike, do you want to come up and do a couple of minutes on what you guys are doing in open banking or thinking about doing?
My name is Mike Doherty. I'm Product Director for Payment Centric, and Steve mentioned FinTech probably started in Fife about 40 years ago, so I'm a relatively new guy. I've only been involved for about 30 years. My colleague Bill over here was probably one of the founders 40 years ago. What we did, when I joined a company called Fortronic, and back in the day Fortronic was making credit and debit card machines that you would see in garage forecourts, retailer shops, etc. And the wonderful technology back then was MagSwipe, cards, signature for authorisation, and it was all about storing forward terminals. So the transaction would store the terminal, and overnight they would be sucked out through a central host system. Over the years that technology evolved, and we've seen huge changes in the industry, starting with chip and pin, which came in and was hugely complex at the time, and now everyone takes it for granted. One of the big debates was, did people remember a 4-digit pin, and how would my granny ever manage without writing it down someplace? Hard to believe, but that's the way it was. But for Tronic, it was probably the start of fintech. We just thought of it as a day job then, not fintech. And even now, we're probably involved in more payment tech than fintech. Fintech's a huge field. But over the years, we developed from the initial store and forward signature verification to online chip and pin. During that time, it's quite interesting that the utility companies were deregulating, and there was a need for collection of payments within local shops. And at the same time, the mobile phone was starting up, and huge numbers of prepaid mobile phones were coming to the market. So within Fortronic, we saw an opportunity to create a payment network where we could go into the communities and collect payments on these little devices, these terminals that we were using and putting in for payments. So we started working and created a company called Payzone, which you might still see today there throughout the country. So myself and Bill started and developed Payzone, and it's still active. Payzone and PayPoint are two big companies today. Eventually, Fortronic was sold to a company called Ingenico, but De La Rue, who were the owner of Fortronic at the time, they saw the value in Payzone as a network rather than just a payment device, and they held on to Payzone. Eventually, come 2000, I left Payzone, set up a company called TF3 Services. And in TF3 Services, we kind of went back to focusing on credit and debit card payments, but as a network. So rather than simply providing software and terminals, we actually created a complete payments platform. So transactions would leave the terminal, come into our platform, and then we would route those to the various acquiring banks. And we were very much focused on niche solutions. So, for example, for WorldPay, we developed the dynamic currency conversion solution that's still live today. So if you go to visit the castle or any tourist resorts around Scotland and the UK, you can, if you're an American tourist, you can pay in US dollars. For global payments, who were running the HSBC network at the time, every single credit and debit card machine that Global Payments deployed was connected to our systems. We then routed those transactions off to Atlanta for authorization. And by the time we left TS3, we had over 150,000 point of sale machines connected to us, and we were doing over 500 million transactions a year processing them. For UnionPay, when UnionPay came into the UK, it obviously started on a relatively small scale. Global Payments, WorldPay, Barclays, Lloyds all wanted to support UnionPay cards through their networks, but they needed to turn the solution around extremely quickly, so they turned to TS3 Services, and we created a complete bespoke end-to-end solution where we wrote the software on point-of-sale devices. We routed the transactions from our host, and we had direct links to Shanghai, sent the transactions for authorization. At the end of each week, we would calculate the merchant service charges, deduct those from the payments due to the merchants, and then we would send out the statements. So it was a complete end-to-end solution for UnionPay for 4 of the big acquirers in the UK. During that time, we also got introduced to Africa, to a bit of a circuitous route. Initially, we were invited out to Kenya to look at putting in credit and debit card payment solutions into Africa. This was going back 2007, 2008. And at the time, it was very difficult to pay by card in Africa. It was pretty much cash everywhere. So we went to Africa and we got involved in a number of projects, but one of the things that struck us while we were there was the amount of cash payments that were taking place. And huge queues were forming every day outside of the power company offices, the water company offices. And when we looked around, we thought, this is exactly the solution that we developed Payzone to solve way back in the late 90s in the UK. So we got involved with a partner in Kenya. We set up essentially an equivalent of PayZone, but in Kenya, to solve the problem. And essentially we're bringing payments into the community. So rather than people having to travel for miles on buses or literally walking for hours to queue up to make payments, we would bring the technology to the local retailers, set them up as agents, and allow payments to be taken locally and immediately to update the relative accounts on whether it's a power company or water company, do mobile phone top-ups, etc. Cut a long story short, TST services were very successful. We sold the business in 2011, stayed with the business for further 4 years, and essentially eventually left, and set up Payment Centric in 2014-15. For the last 4 years we've been developing a brand new platform. It's all cloud-based, using the latest technology, and essentially it does very similar services. It can do credit and debit card processing, it can do all sorts of online payments, it can do money remittance. And what we're doing now is we're focusing on Africa. We still see a huge opportunity there. Africa is going to expand, explode economically over the next 10-20 years. And we still see a huge opportunity to provide payment services in Kenya. We've currently gone live with a new network, again similar to PayZone in Kenya. And we are providing, so we're establishing a network of shops, taking all sorts of payments. We've established a relationship with Barclays Bank out there, where we've developed an agency banking solution. So as well as taking payments into the community, we're taking banking services into the community. So customers can come along, make deposits, make withdrawals from the local shops, obtain statements and balances on their account. And one of the uniques we're bringing as well is the services in country. There's a huge diaspora in the UK, Europe and beyond, and we're bringing those shops into Europe, into the UK as virtual shops. International remittances is an absolutely huge market. Something like $650 billion US dollars annually is the official market, but they could perhaps double that through the unofficial market. A lot of the money that's set back is set back for a specific purpose. It's for funding schooling, it's for household goods. But when people send cash, it can often be misspent, and there's no end of stories of people sending money only to find it's been completely misspent. So what we're doing is we're now opening up a virtual shop, so people in the UK, for example, can pay the electricity bill or the water bill or top up mobile phones directly in Africa. We've test marketed this in Kenya and with the African diaspora in the UK, and to Oman, everyone's very keen to use this service, because when people come to this country to better their lives, get better education, jobs, it's still very hard work to earn the cash. It's difficult. They don't want to be spending it back to be frittered away. So there's kind of universal acceptance. This is a very desirable solution. In addition to the networks, we also discovered while we were there an opportunity for business to business and business to consumer payments. We all take for granted that salaries get paid into our bank accounts, and there's back systems, there's faster payment systems. In Africa, these things don't really exist to any large degree. So we're working with local companies to put in essentially automated payment systems. So for example, companies can pay their staff, could be through mobile phone top-ups. A lot of security companies add credit to their staff's mobile phones so they can keep in touch. We had an example where we spoke to the Gambia Minister of Education in Glasgow a few months back, and she was telling us that teachers still get paid by people going around with sacks of cash and brown bags handing over the cash to the teachers. There was a huge strike in the Gambia because teachers weren't getting paid because the money was being held up someplace, or people were being robbed on route to paying them. And we're looking at putting in solutions to overcome that. We're actually live in Kenya with that right now. So we can make payments from businesses direct to bank accounts, direct to mobile wallet accounts. M-Pesa is the largest and most successful mobile wallet solution in the world. And we are hooked into the M-Pesa system so we can make and take payments through M-Pesa. So those three different aspects: on the ground network, the virtual shop to make payments, and the business and business to consumer payments. So the question is, what's all that got to do with open banking? Well, that kind of brings us bang up to date on the latest technology, and what we're looking to do is use open banking in the UK to allow the diaspora to make more efficient payments. And when diaspora sign up with us to use our services, right now we do automated AML and KYC checks through a number of bureaus. And we're looking at using open banking as a way to make that more efficient and more streamlined solution, and also then to use open banking as a payment method rather than cash or card payments. So we're getting involved in open banking projects on that basis. So, thank you.
The start of payments. Any questions?
Sorry,
Quick questions? You talk to them afterwards, obviously, that's the whole point of these quick chats, is to open up the conversation. So, no, thanks, Mike. And also, I think the last one we had, and then does anyone want to do a quick couple minutes on what they're doing? Is there any burning attitude to share? No? Cool. So maybe next time. Andrew? We also wanted to share some of the things we've been doing in open banking. One of those is our own take on PFM, which has been one of the longest running use cases for bank data. I think a lot of these conversations today started from Egg Money Manager and First Direct building PFM products. Gavin, I wish he was here, he would know the date. It's got to be 15, 20 years ago. Mint.com in the States uses one of the big reference points to the value of bank data from a consumer money management point of view. We've been building Andrew's been building a little PFM product that we thought we'd demo quickly, a few minutes, but also to try and get as much of your feedback maybe after this as possible and help us understand how people use things.
Yeah, so my name's Andrew. I'm a business analyst at IDCO. I'm the project lead for Nomo. So Nomo stands for No Money, Mo Money. It's a personal finance app, but we're taking a different take on what a personal finance app is. So rather than giving users giving them an in-depth analysis of where their money is going, what we're doing to the user is we're basically answering the question that we all ask today. If I asked you how well are you doing with your money, you would say you wouldn't really be able to say like a specific number. The idea with Nomo is that it's got the personality approach, so if you're doing bad, it's going to say you're doing bad. So these are some examples of the screenshots. So on the left, we've got the detailed summary. So the blue represents the last 3 months of the user's cash flow average. And then the colored line represents the cash flow of the current month. And then what Nomo does is does the difference and then tells you if you're doing better than the last previous months. So if you're doing good, it's going to say just wine and dine. And if you're doing bad, well, it's going to say it looks like soup for dinner. So the idea is to kind of become like it's a very simplified form of a PFM. So what I'll do is I'll give you a demo of the full OB journey, if I can log in.
So we've just recently plugged, using our own platform obviously, open banking into Nomo so that we support, I think it's what, 11 banks now in the UK?
Yeah.
9, 10,
something like that. Yeah. So this is Nomo over here. So you open it. Got the standard terms and conditions, the fun stuff. So this is we're currently in test flight, so we're just doing this is our MVP, and we're still doing testing. So a lot of this is subject to change. So it's an honest cash flow tracker, magic 8-ball for money. So the idea is, can I drink tonight? And Nomo will say no. So it does all the thinking for you.
You can tell who's building it, right?
So it lets you know if you're doing good or bad. It's got 3 personalities, a friendly one, which is a little bit nicer. Then you've got cheeky, which is a little bit more sassier. And then you've got the motivational one, which is like the cheesy quotes and stuff that some people really like. Which came out of the user testing. And ultimately, you'll find out if it's salmon or sardines for dinner. So connecting to the account, this is using the Direct ID widget. It's probably asleep, but this is the consent stage of the widget. Got standard stuff. It breaks down into the account details. So for consumers, they'll be able to see what details your bank account is being asked. So your account details, account transactions, and then you've got your links to the terms and conditions and privacy policy. They confirm. You then choose a bank, so I'll use one of the testing ones. Just this is HSBC. So what happens now is the user is going to now be redirected to the bank's online website. So this is HSBC. So as you can see here, the entity is the ID code, because Nomo is owned by the ID code. And this stage is called authentication. So this is the user understanding what is being asked of them and what they're being asked to share. So what you'll find is that all the banks have their own methods of the UI. So logging into the different banks, it's not all going to be the same. So HSBC love a pin sentry. So you'll have to exit the app, go into the HSBC app, generate a code. I'll write this down because I'll probably forget. And an example of the banks not being up to the standard of like kind of the UX side is that when I enter a number, I'll do 9 and then I'll close the keyboard, which is really annoying for users. Do it again. So now what happens is I'm going to now authorize the bank to share my bank data with the ID code or Nomo. Turn to third party. And this is the user logged into Nomo. So it's just syncing now. It's got the standard FAQ settings. When the account was last updated, direct ID because you have to have it there. And this is basically the snapshot. This is telling you if you're up or down. This is a demo, by the way, as it says.
You're not up for any questions?
No. This is the summary. So there's a lot of priming involved for the end user just to let them know what's going on. So right now, it's just been synced with Open Banking. So this is connected. So as you can see, on the colored days, you got Saturday, Sunday. So you got the yellow days are the days when the user was above their average, and the orange is when they're below their average. And this is it. So it looks like a more money kind of day.
So you're going for a drink today?
Yeah. If you don't feel like a cheeky personality, go on to motivating. It says stay strong. And if you want friendly, it's just the perfect day. Yeah, and just wine and dine. So that's Nomo. It's the demo.
Cool. Thank you very much. So yeah, absolutely. I think he's done a great job. Does anyone have any questions for Andrew?
Yes. When you did your customer research, how do people react in effect being told whether they can spend the money or how to
So what we found was that getting users to appeal to the idea of something where it's like, oh, you'll be able to see your goals and see what you should be saving for each month. There's a lot of stigma about the money, and looking at connected to your bank is very depressing, and there's lots of PFMs that do that. So with Nomo, what we found is by kind of just summarizing and just tell them if you're doing bad, so you quickly look, cry, and then continue the day, or if it's saying you're good, then just continue the day and they have a good idea. So that's the kind of customer research we did, was just getting users to give feedback of how they would want to be spoken to about their money.
Thanks.
And you're looking for as much feedback as possible, right? I mean,
Yes.
the OBIE's done a huge amount around customer experiences and journeys recently and trying to establish some better paths to that. I think we've seen on the raw end of of that side of how bad it can be between, or how many variations there are between banks and stuff. But as our own implementation, we'd love feedback. So thanks, cool.
So, in terms of the HSBC was one of the smoothest. It'll take you up to 5 minutes. The instructions are currently wrong on their online portal, and there's a lot of work done with F-Data to kind of push the CMA9 to follow and update their user experience for the users. At the moment we're in, make it better. At the moment we're doing a test flight, so you can just go to the IDCO site, and at the bottom you can just sign up to the private beta, and then it takes you to a form which follows the GDPR compliance stuff, so don't need to worry about that, and you'll be able to test it out. And the last thing is it's only for iPhone users, so I guess that's
We'll work on that.
Alright.
Cool, thank you very much. I think that's it. Is there anything else to cover?
No, just get mingling.
Anyone else? Anything else they want to share too?
Oh, anyone's got any input, anyone wants to see anything at other events, just let us know, get us on the emails or just chat to us just now.
Yeah. So we're always looking for ideas, right? So what should the next
And speakers.
open banking meetup be about? And yeah, absolutely. And get involved. I mean, this is our attempt to try and pull as much community together. I think F-Data and the customer experience, customer journeys is a great example of how as an industry we can have an effect.